Welcome, everyone. You're in for a real treat here. We've had this long tradition of final wrap-up session. Let me, again, because they deserve it, just to set this up and brag on our presidents and Presidents Pat Donahue and Ray Yanuzzi, Pat and Ray from Mercer and Camden County Colleges, respectively. We also have in the room, I think we did, Acting President David Spang from Burlington County College. Please stand up, Dave. Welcome. So about 5 years ago, I guess, the community college presidents and trustees went down this path, big ideas. You're familiar with that label? It's kind of gotten traction. And the point I want to make to you is these New Jersey community college presidents really had a lot of wisdom, because if you've looked at the most recent AACC publications, now that whole effort, the 21st Century Commission, and more recently the Empowering Community Colleges piece that came out 2 weeks ago, our presidents were first in. The national conversation, student success conversation, started about 2 years later. And it's remarkably impressive, I think, and you will agree, that the priorities that our presidents landed on virtually mirror the national priorities that came later. So kudos to our group to get out early and often on student success. I think probably virtually every session you heard here today hit that theme, student success. And you're going to hear from these two presidents. Pat is our chair, I said this morning, and just, I can't say it enough, how gracious she has, gracious, I had trouble saying that, didn't I? She has been in making her time available to us. And Ray is the chair-elect, and so we'll look forward to his leadership when he takes the reins in the fall. And so let me hand off to first Pat by saying again, we had this 8 hours, believe it or not, 8-hour president's retreat, just vibrant, energetic. I tease Ray, and Pat will join me in this. He knows where I'm going with this story. So we're at the end of the retreat, we're walking out to the parking lot, and Pat really put this agenda together, and she had the wisdom of engaging several presidents in it, and Ray had a part, and getting into the cars, and Ray said, "This was pretty good, Larry." Pause. It wasn't even boring. Now, if you know Dr. Yanuzzi, this was high praise. I wasn't sure about the suggestion that prior meetings of our group maybe did not meet that litmus test, but he can speak to that when he gets the mic.
8 hours with the presidents.
Anyhow, Dr. Donahue, if you want to get us started, you're going to hear the vision of our sector through the lens of a couple of our leader presidents.
The first one I'm going to mention to you may actually surprise you, because to us, it's all crystal clear. And that is, we believe that we need to work on the value of college, sharing the message about what is the value that our community colleges add and what our image is. That is not to say to change our mission and vision, but some of you may be aware that there are currently 20 bills in the legislature that have been dropped that deal with regulating some aspect or another of our colleges. Some of them don't really pertain to community colleges, but the vast majority do. And when you read those closely and look at what they think they need to be regulating, it's clear that they don't all understand what we do, why we do it, or how we do it. So no one is proposing our mission changes. We are still about access to student success, and serving the residents in our county, the employers in our county, serving our community, as we are all about and have been. We are certainly about making as many of those students successful as possible, and both Ray and I are going to talk a little more about that. But the whole concept that when you come to the community college, you are getting education that makes you better prepared for the workforce, for a real job, for being able to navigate and negotiate the world of work, as well as those students who transfer and get higher level degrees. So at the end of our conversation, which actually was sort of heated at various times, what we're clear about is we need to rethink just saying the same words and recraft the message so that it has a little more pizzazz, and so it gets people's attention as a new message, even though the underlying mission and vision will continue to be, we are here to provide education and great service to our students, to our community, to the employers in our area. The second thing I'm going to talk about is the one you should all be totally expecting, and that is the completion agenda and the student success agenda. And for most of us, we say those words as if they were equally the same, that the completion agenda is about getting more students to become successful. Now, most of you know this has been around several years, since both President Obama set a target for increasing the number of graduates, and several of the big foundations set targets. A lot of discussion from a lot of people. And when they were doing that, enrollment numbers were going up a lot. Most of you know they're not doing that anymore. In fact, for most of our colleges, the enrollment numbers are starting to go down. So I've looked at our expected graduation rate this year, which had nicely been going up like those numbers in the projection chart, and this year they're going down, and enough to significantly change from that. Part of that message is the only way we can continue to add more graduates is to really become effective at two things. One of them is making the students we have more successful learners so that they complete. And the other is that thing you often hear from legislators and from the Department of Labor and others, and that is reaching further into the population, to the students not going to college, so that they get on the track of getting the kind of college education that will prepare them for the jobs of the future. As you know, every time we hear the latest report from Tony Carnevale or whichever group is putting it out, those reports continue to say, with each passing year, more and more jobs require students to be adequately prepared, to have good education and to have good training in a lot of areas. And to catch up with the completion agenda, to get back on that track, we're going to have to become very good at bringing in that broader spread in the population, at getting further down to the group not normally going to college. And we're going to have to continue on the track that this conference and many others in the last 2 years have been about, which is strategies to help our students become more successful learners. We've worked a lot on developmental education. We've worked a lot on aligning with K-12. One of the things we have done as a state is to work on what we call the student success model. And our reason for doing that was to make sure that the only success measure is not earning a degree, but recognizing that for some of our students, completing developmental education is a major accomplishment. Completing their first semester of college level courses or completing 1 year is a major accomplishment. And in our success model, we followed some of the things from the Voluntary Framework of Accountability, referred to as VFA, and Completion by Design, where we're not just tracking that a student comes in, but tracking how they come in. Were they developmental in English? Were they developmental students in math? And then how successful were they? So all of those things are very important. I'm not going to try to review everything about developmental education because a whole lot of you have been in sessions most of today that dealt with the new strategies that we've been trying, the work that you have been doing on your campuses for the last couple of years to really make those changes. But I am going to segue from the student success model and keeping that data to the third and last topic that I intend to put on the table, and that is what our fundamental business model is for the community colleges. We are in a world where tax dollars are not available at the same level they were when our colleges were formed, or through most of the 70s and 80s and into the 90s. And they're never going to be available at the same level they were before. And at every one of your colleges, our numbers are different about what the state provides and what the county provides. I don't think there's a single instance in the state where the state provides a third and the county provides a third as originally conceived in the 60s. New Jersey was just like almost all the other states. That a third formula was a pretty national formula, and for the most part, it's just not working. But there will also be a limit to how much we can charge our students. So collectively, we are all needing to look at the strategy. Just save a few pennies here and save a few pennies there will not carry us forever into the future. We are going to have to think strategically about how we do things differently so we can guarantee that our product is still very successful learning opportunities for our students. The segue of the student success model there is one of the things that is now in like 17 states, number changes sort of daily, and is in the legislature here for the second session of the legislature, and that is using a performance-based funding model for part of our funding system. And so when I talked about more than one success measure, not just degrees, but having some other things that are also success measures, we know that's important, and I can assure you that the presidents are already working on suggestions and strategies from the presidents for negotiating with the legislature, suggesting to the Secretary for Higher Education how that should be implemented and what those strategies are, so that we can, in fact, protect the integrity of our colleges and the financial stability of our colleges to the greatest possible extent. So those are my three big topics that came from the President's Retreat. Value and image, how are we sharing that message? Completion agenda and student success, and then really being serious about the rather permanent and long-term change in our business model and beginning to restructure our operations and our finances for the future. With that, I'm going to turn you over to Dr. Iannuzzi, who is the higher education representative in the PARC process here in New Jersey, and that makes him the expert.
I don't think I'm that much of an expert, Pat, but I'm happy to talk about the Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers. You've heard that acronym? Anybody go to the thing we had in Ryder? Some of you went. The momentous day of 400 faculty and staff from every college in the state. It was a big event. Talk about that, but first I agree with Pat that we're at a very important strategic time in the history of community colleges nationally and in our state, both because we have the greater focus than ever before on what we do. We are asked to do more than ever before, and that's part of what I'm going to talk about with the PARC process. And we probably have less money to do it with than ever before, which is a unique challenge. And maybe if we have some time at the end of this, we can have some questions. I know one of the things in these sessions I've enjoyed before is is hearing questions on anything and everything from faculty and staff in attendance. But first, a little bit about PARC. This is the testing phase now of the Common Core curriculum, which has been in place in K-12 schools nationally now for about 5 or 6 years, unevenly implemented. That is true. Some districts are all the way through from third grade through to higher classes. Others are just beginning to implement it in some places. But the Common Core curriculum is an attempt to answer those questions that you see from a variety of places. We see it in the newspapers when they talk about how America ranks 12th or 14th or 21st behind Singapore and Finland and all these other countries in our school children's scores on math and literacy. We hear it from business people who say students are coming out of high school unprepared. They don't have the skills that they need to work successfully these days. And we hear it from a lot of you in the room when you say these students that are coming to us in our classes really aren't ready to do the work. So how do you answer that? The Common Core curriculum and the PARC testing now as a part of that is a long-term nationwide effort to address those issues. And it's not easy to do. It's not easy to do a project that takes in every state, every school district, every child. And that's why it's a vast undertaking, which is going to take a long while to see success. But it's on its way. It's begun to work, and I think New Jersey is among the states that are committed to following through. You see in the newspapers every few days, this state or this legislature is backing away from immediate implementation, or they're questioning the use of these tests. However, I think long-term, it's the way to go. It's something that we need to do. And if you want further information on any of the things I'm talking about today, the New Jersey PARC website, the NJPARCC, or the National PARC website, has all of the tests, sample questions, has the timeline of how it has been developed and what's going to happen in the next 2 years. It has articles and research that has been done so far, and it explains the kinds of research that are going to take place in the next 2 years, activities of which we need some college faculty and staff participation. Part of the unique aspect of this effort, I think, is that it is a partnership. That's what the P stands for, and it's a partnership between higher education and K-12 nationwide. And I participate in these phone calls every 2 weeks, and they go Arkansas, Alabama, New Jersey, and people chime in attendance, and it truly is a national effort. And I think it will achieve results. Now, what has happened this past week or month, maybe some of you know, maybe some of you have children who've taken some of these tests already this year. Anybody? None of you have kids in New Jersey's fine school district? Yeah. Now, what they've done this year is test the test. What they did was break up the potential questions, spread them around to, I think New Jersey, almost 75% of the school districts participated in the pilot. And this is to test how the questions work. Are they good questions? Do they give the kinds of results that the testers are looking for? Can the students handle it? Are the questions too hard, too easy, whatever? Part of what they're testing too is the new method of assessing student knowledge. That is not just a multiple choice. There are a lot of written answers that are asking students to read articles or short pieces and then synthesize them in a small written response. There are a lot of questions using assistive technology, drag and drop or color in things with computers or tablets or laptops. Part of the thing that they're trying to figure out over this past year is how to implement that kind of testing in all the school districts. It's a challenge in terms of the technology. It's a challenge in terms of bandwidth in some places, but part of what they want to test this spring is how that worked and what they need to do in the next year to be able to do that. This summer, what they will be doing is looking at what students said on all of these questions. There's going to be national panels and state panels to review the results of this year's practice testing, and then between now and a year from now, another set of tests will be made from grades 3 to 11 on reading, writing, and math, and then it will be administered next spring nationally for the first time. So that's all students in grades 3 to 11 will be taking these tests at the end of the year. Now in New Jersey, they will replace eventually, if not right away, but I think pretty soon is the plan on the Department of Ed, The HESPA test, which many people have reviled over many years, and one of the big examples they always give is how 90% of students in New Jersey pass the HESPA, meaning they're successful high school graduates, and they come to us and 50, 60, 70% need to take some developmental course. So how are these tests proving anything? The tests that they're administering now are supposed to be more rigorous, are supposed to be more connected to the Common Core curriculum, and are supposed to yield results that will genuinely show students are college and career ready. A lot of work needs to be done in the next 2 years to make that the case, right? But next year, after the tests are administered for the first time, there'll be another set of studies that they want college faculty to participate in, to review the results of those, and then help set the standard for what the score will be that determines college and career readiness. It's going to be a 5-point scale, and they're going to say 4.2, 4.1, 3.8 indicates college readiness. Now, they're not sure exactly what number it will be. That depends on what the answers are, how people grade those answers. Also, for the 11th grade, and I think all the way down, but we're mostly interested in the 11th grade, you'll be getting diagnostic-based results so that the students will get, the parents will get, and we're working on the process where the colleges will get how the students did in English and math on these tests. Then we will be asked to participate with school districts to help students respond to those answers during their 12th grade and be better prepared when they come to us after they graduate. We're doing these, many of you are involved right now in the pilot projects that the Commissioner of Education, Secretary of Education gave us the funding for. In each of the community colleges, there's several projects, some of which are involving high schools, that will test various ways of intervening with online-based materials, with classes, with tutoring of various kinds. We're doing a variety of projects, and the hope is to find out which ones of those are successful. I would guess at next year's gathering of this conference, there'll be presentations about that from various colleges. What we will be asked to do in the future, community colleges, is engage even more strongly than we are now with high schools to help students from the 11th grade to the 12th grade raise their scores on these tests so that they will be college ready when they come to us. The tests will also eventually be used as a measure of college graduation. Not right away. The scores that will be set as college ready are not the same scores that will be used to determine high school graduation for a while. I think the goal will be to set them lower and then over the years raise them higher, because the students who will be taking the tests in these first couple of years will not have had the benefit of the full core curriculum education from grades 3 to grades 11. But eventually in 4 or 5 years, that should change, and most students will have the full experience of the Common Core all the way through. Common Core is supposed to be different than the way things have been taught now. Mathematics is supposed to be more integrated, both from year to year, not where a student will do geometry one year and then never see it again, or do algebra in 8th grade and then never be asked to do algebra again until they take the test at our school and they say, oh, I forgot all that stuff. It's supposed to be more integrated all the way through 11 grades. And the emphasis in reading and writing is supposed to be greater on nonfiction work than on fiction and literary work. I spent a lot of time when I was in grammar school memorizing poems by American poets with 3 names like John Greenleaf Whittier and Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, and I could still recite the prologue to Evangeline. But when you go to college, what you're being asked to do is read something in social psych, history, economics, and then synthesize that and respond as we ask students to do in our courses. And that's the kind of thing that will be done in reading and writing education on the part. After the spring of 2015, the tests will be, test results will be used. We will get diagnostic material, but there'll also be a series of validation studies where they're going to compare the scores that students have on PARCC with things like ACT, SAT, and with students who have taken the tests and then gone on to college and taken a freshman course and what their success has been there. They're asking again for college and university participation in the validation studies to test how these results compare so that they can be fairly certain that a score of 4.2 equates to such and such a score in ACT or SAT, or a 70% chance that a student will get a C in Comp 1, things like that. Over the years, what we will expect to see, once the PARCC tests are in place and the Common Core curriculum has been implemented, are fewer students coming to us needing developmental education. Particularly if the education in the Common Core is successful and students attain these skills at each grade level, when they come to us, they should be college ready, or we will work with them between 11th and 12th grade to make them closer to college ready. I don't think this is going to happen overnight. I think this is going to take a decade or more, or maybe even longer, but it's an effort that I think needs to be done. We will also probably need to be making changes in what we offer as testing and developmental education for those students who don't come directly to us out of high schools, because we still will foreseeably get half or so of our students from other sources, other states, other countries, other age groups, who will not have had this, and we do still need to bring them up to what we will now say is the college readiness expectation, which will be higher than what it is now. I also think that we'll need to look at our 101 level courses in a variety of subjects, because if students do come with these skills, and I think they eventually will after some years of this, they will be ready to do work that's probably more challenging than what we ask them to do now in many of our 101 courses. And if you look on the PARCC website and look at the sample curricula and the sample questions for my field is English, so looking at what they ask students to do in 11th and 12th grade English, and I'd say, yeah, well, if they could do that, they probably are better than what we ask them to do now in 101 and maybe 102. So I think it will eventually result in a change in curricula in many of our areas. So it is a time of transition in that, as it is in all the other areas that Pat mentioned. I think it's a challenging time to do what we do. I think there's never been more of a need to do what we do in community colleges for a greater number of people, because, as Pat said, without some kind of thing that we offer, and it may not be an associate's degree, it may not even be a 30-credit certificate, but without something a student gets that they can come to us for, they're not going to be able to do much economically or socially in their lives after that. So with that, I'll leave what I have to say, but I think we have a little bit of time for questions. Larry, what do you want to do?
Q&A, but let's first thank Presidents Donahue and Yannuzzi for those observations. I want to give the first question and comment to Acting President David Spang, but let me just quickly recap. If you have questions about, if you want to drill down more on all things Common Core and PARCC, as you just heard outlined by Dr. Yannuzzi, we can do that. It might have been said, but let me say it again if it has been said, that we're really proud and pleased that Ray is the New Jersey higher ed lead on the statewide conversation about Common Core and PARCC. Not the community college lead, the higher ed lead.
Because we have a bigger role to play. When we talk on these national panels and committees, what most of the rest of higher ed is concerned with is, all right, we're going to get these scores and we'll know whether they're college ready or not. Right? What the community colleges are concerned with is what can we do to help the students get college ready before they come to us. It's a whole different orientation toward working with this. It's a greater responsibility. Some people say, why should we have to do this? Well, this is what we do.
And Dr. Donahue sketched three very important themes, the challenges of image building and branding for community colleges in 2014 and going forward. Secondly, the whole student success and completion agenda that is so front and center. And then thirdly, the reality check, the tough fiscal climate that we're in and what that means for the community college business model, if you will, going forward. So think about all of that, or think about any question that you always wanted to ask a community college president and never had the chance to do that. David, if you'd get us started.
The elements of the Big Ideas efforts that we've undertaken statewide include many of the concepts that you've both mentioned. Dr. Donahue, the broad themes, as Larry mentioned, that you discussed, and Dr. Yannuzzi around the PARCC and the preparation of students when they come to our schools. Can you say a few words regarding the evolution of the Big Ideas concepts since their inception And where do you see those, the focus of the big ideas being, say, in the next 3 to 5 years?
There were originally 8 big ideas, and each one had 3 to 6 goals or strategies underneath that, and we went through each and every one. There are a number of places where we were able to check things off and say, yep, we did what we said we were going to do. One of those is certainly develop a student success model. We're still implementing it. The last couple colleges have not been able to gather all the data, but 16 colleges have, and we're content that there is value in what we have and we can use it. On the first 2, which most of the faculty heard about most often, the improving developmental education and working with the school districts to align things, we have made huge steps, including the summits that some of you attended, the speakers who were mentioned this morning that we brought in for those summits, and right up through what Ray was referring to, our College Readiness Now pilot projects that are funded from the Secretary of Higher Education's office. So we've made some very concrete steps on both of those, and we're at the point now where we need to set the goal for next steps, not just continue doing what we've done so far. So that's 1, 2, and 3. 4 is adjunct faculty development, and we have partially gotten to a point where we're building a database of them. Statewide, the human resource officers did some work on that and laid out some framework about what would a professional development certificate or training program look like. The next step for that one is to have the academic officers generate what the content for that adjunct training would be. And the concept was we develop it, maybe some of it's online, some of it we may share and send people to a common place for it, but generally, and today there were 2 or 3 sessions that were about how are we integrating our adjunct faculty, how are we preparing them to be as good, as effective with our students as our faculty. So I think we're still very much on track for that. We're a few steps into the road, but we haven't closed the loop on what's the content to be able to actually use it. The 5th big idea was the purchasing consortium. The business officers have laid out a contract for how that will work, and we have identified a person who, Larry, I believe starts in June or July, whichever, who will be working part-time to facilitate us getting better pricing by consortial purchasing together. 6 and 7. 6 and 7 are partially done and will not appear on the new list. We have determined that the other things we're working on are so much more important that we need to focus our energy elsewhere. And big idea 8, a number of you may have worked on, that was the top 10 courses, meaning the most enrolled general education courses, to work statewide on what are the learning outcomes for those gatekeeper courses. And I know the first 5 are finished, the second 5 are nearly finished. They may be putting some finishing touches on it. And the recommendation from the academic officers, which the presidents accepted, was rather than saying, let's go more courses doing common outcomes, is to step back now and looking at the work that's going on around the country, from ASCU, from Lumina, from other groups, about how are we defining general education. New Jersey did a great job. Our community colleges worked very hard to have a common gen ed core statewide, but it's still basically a silo pick courses from each category, and there's a lot of work and exploration being done now to revise how we think about what's in the general education core. So in the new iteration, which will be coming out over the summer and then a next stage of development during the fall with the presidents and the trustees, Big Idea 8, which will in the future be, and I don't know what the name is yet, you can help us think of a name, either the next big thing or the next big ideas, or some other name. If you've got a good name, we'd love to have it, because Big Ideas is...
It's so ingrained now, though. We're going to Big Ideas 2.0. It's not, I got to say this about the Big Ideas. When we first did it, it really was a trustees initiative before it was a president's initiative, and it was one of these trustee retreats. And I said, oh, God, we got to do this. And they had the poster boards up, and you put the multi-voting yellow sticker and a green sticker, and we run around. And these ideas emerged. And we said, oh, okay, all right, we'll do them. The trustees want us to do this. We'll put something together and show them that we addressed it. But as we got into them, and as people worked, and as the various other groups of deans and vice presidents and officers worked on each of the projects, they have brought things together that we wouldn't probably have otherwise done, just like many of the things we have been able to do as 19 colleges together have made us much stronger and more effective in doing what we do statewide. And we've started to see results from outside our own organizations about it, the money that Rochelle Hendricks gave us to try these projects, the response we've gotten in the legislature to some of our proposals, and the attention that we're now getting from foundations for funding. Is a result of the effort that everybody has put into these projects over 5 years now. So I think it was long-term a very worthwhile enterprise. I think it's laid the groundwork for what we can do for the next 5 years in each of these areas, and I think be successful. So while I was cynical at the beginning, I think that the big ideas have been worth it, and look forward to seeing them continue.
You're never cynical.
Never.
So the final part of your step is there will now be a new revised list with some name yet to be determined
2.0.
that, okay, 2.0. You're the techie in the crowd
No,
now?
no.
Wait a minute, I'm the engineering dean, not you. Anyway, they will come
Bigger
out.
ideas.
Okay, bigger ideas.
Bigger ideas.
There will be a new revised list because all of the affinity groups, the vice presidents of academic affairs and vice presidents of student affairs and the chief business officers, all of those affinity groups have really focused and worked very hard on the tasks that we had set. And it is time on some of them declare victory, and let's clarify what the next step should be. We're not just going to keep working on the same thing forever and ever. And that is coming out in the next couple months.
Larry's right. The ACCC stole it from us, right? They did.
My question is for Dr. Yanucci about the future of testing. As you say, with the PARC testing coming through the K-12 system, and how we'll be looking at their results to see how well our students will be, how well their students will be prepared for us. It seems like the PARC testing now will override AccuPlacer.
Yes. Well, we'll still need some test for the students who don't come to us directly from high school.
That's
Now,
true.
whether that will be AccuPlacer, well, if you follow this movement nationally, which now, I mean, some of our friends out in the hall with tables, they're all trying to figure out who's going to be the winner of the big testing sweepstakes between, you got Pearson, College Board, ETS, ACT. There does need to be another kind of test, I think, that we would use once these are firmly established, and it might be from one of these same companies. It'll be, I bet, a little bit different, because if we're saying college readiness is now what the PARC tests do, the test that we use for other people to see that they're college ready who haven't come right out of high school should be at least correlated to that somehow.
I would think statistically they'll be matched.
Well,
Have
that's
some type-
what they're going to do with PARC is try to match it to other tests first, and then I think the other tests will then try to adapt themselves to what PARC does once it's established.
And that would bind then our K-12 friends with our end of the world and make everybody a little bit happier.
And the GED component too. I mean, we do more and more GED, and if you follow what's happening in GED, that test is changing rapidly now too. I mean, I've said to the people out there that what there needs to be is some assessment device that is, if not the same product, at least parallel from what students are doing to show their achievement at the end of high school, people who have dropped off the track in an alternative way to show it, and what we do in developmentals. I think that should be one unified assessment element.
Yanuzzi, as the higher ed representative, again, a Park Common Core question. A lot of the emphasis has been on assessment, assessment, assessment. Where is the discussion about curriculum, pedagogy, strategy? What are the schools of ed doing to prepare the next generation of teachers to teach?
The schools of ed have been active way before we in community college have been asked to step up, because they've been preparing the people who graduated the last 4 or 5 years to go into the schools now that have begun to use the Park curriculum 3rd grade through 11th. The testing that is designed inside the Park testing system and inside the Common Core is, if we believe what they show us in all of the examples, and I've heard this from some teachers and students, more correlated to what they're actually doing in the class than what I understand the practice is now in New Jersey schools anyway, would have the ASK test. Anybody familiar with that? Where what the teachers do and what the students come home and complain is, we're going to stop doing our math for a month now and do ASK test math and then go back to our math or something like that. I've heard that from several people. Supposedly these are more integrated, and they're formative and summative. There are tests that are supposed to be grading, but used to help see where students stand. And I think the emphasis now, because people are naturally anxious about testing, people don't like to be tested. There's a genuine concern among NJEA and the state of New Jersey about how the tests are going to be integrated with teacher evaluation, which unfortunately came through exactly the same time that this is being promoted. But I think the emphasis has to be on the curriculum, and I think the curriculum itself is sound. And if you look at the examples online, you can see it. And as educators decide if you think this is a good way to teach reading, writing, and math. I think it is. But if you're going to do that, then you have to have a way to assess it. And I think the assessments here are better than what has been used now to determine student progress through the curriculum and college readiness, because they grow right out of the content in the testing. So I think it's a better set of tests. I think ultimately, and this is what the experts have said, it will be the same or less number of minutes on testing, because ASK would go away, MAPE would go away, HESPA would go away, and this more integrated test all the way through would be what is used to measure college readiness. And it would be at each grade level too. The theory is they would tell students in 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, you're not on track. Now what the school districts are going to do to put them on track is another big unanswered question, right? But the idea is to let students know early on, not just when they come. Right now, the shock is they graduate high school, they got the diploma, they come to us and take the AccuPlacement and say, you need 3 remedial courses. And I say, what? No, I graduated high school. And supposedly, students will be given information early on, and parents early on, that Mary or Joe is not on track to be successful in college. And here's what you can do about it.
In some of the Department of Ed meetings and some of the newspaper things, some of the places I've read, they're actually talking about at each grade level, if they're not on track, school districts either having a mandatory summer program, or if the tests were given in April, mandatory Saturday programs over a lot of things. No one has yet, in what I've seen, addressed how are the school districts going to pay for that extra time on task, because obviously the students aren't just coming and sitting by themselves. Nor has anybody addressed what that means to families that have lots of other plans. So there's this big dream of, so we're going to have mandatory catch-up work at every level, but I haven't really seen anybody work through the practical stuff. I'm from Missouri. You have to show me.
I've seen it once. I mean, this was my big question every time I was at these meetings too. I'm on the board of a charter school in Camden, and they have a system now which they apply to the tests that are used now, but would just be transferred over to these park tests, where they have scores, and if a student has a certain score below what the standard should be, they get in-class help or after-school help, and then another quartile below, they have to come on Saturdays, and then they have to come in the summer. They have it worked out, and they pay for it. Of course, charter schools are able to do certain things because they pay less in some ways, but in some ways they pay more. So,
But that still leads to the same question that we have, that I know has come up in many of the presentations about developmental. We pilot, we practice, we try all these new things, but the cost
scalability.
question, oh, you just had to say it first, didn't you?
There was an article yesterday about it. The colleges worried, and that's true. All of these things you've read, and it's in that AACC thing too. We can do a lot of great things in pilots if you take 2 sections and you have an advisor and you follow the students, monitor them closely, and call them up at home. Did they do their homework? When you have 3,000 or 4,000, how do you do it? But we have to do something.
All right. Just curious, when I'm talking about that and developmental education, thinking about students state, the adjunct faculty to full-time faculty ratio is obviously, it's even worse in developmental education than it is
Right.
in gateway courses, and that's worse than it is in major courses very often. So I was wondering, when we think forward to a business model in a time of increased fiscal constraints, and at the same time, having ambitions for, improving student success, whether presidents are considering what kind of a model would be workable for faculty in the future. I mean, you mentioned adjunct faculty development, which is really important, but how is that going to look in the future if funding continues at the same rate? Are we going to continue with very large proportions of classes taught by adjuncts, and how will that factor into our ability to increase student success?
I think we're never going to have enough money to hire the portion of faculty on a full-time basis that we like. I mean, I'd love to do it, but even, when you do the math, even to increase adjunct salaries by $100 or $200, which would be nothing, would be $1 million in a budget, right? I think the role of full-time faculty is going to have to change so that in addition to teaching a certain number of classes, they also have responsibility for a certain number of adjunct faculty to work with them, to assess the results of their students' work, to do development on a small scale, one-to-one or small group. That's the only way I can see us doing it in the future, because, I mean, I've been in community colleges 44 years, and I'm the department chair and dean and all that, and you just say, who are we going to get 10 o'clock tomorrow? Oh, here's a friend here, call her up. Oh, Pat, can you come 10 o'clock tomorrow? Here's the book.
Oh,
right?
thank you.
I mean, but that's what we have done that, and I think the good part is we have provided education for many people. We've done it at a low cost. We've had access. Students can show up the day the college opens, and we say you can enroll, and we'll get you in. But the quality of the instruction spread out over staff that are not as connected, and there's some good adjunct faculty who could play this same role. In other words, they could also be mentors to 4 or 5 newer adjuncts. That may be the only way we can have some assurance.
I will say,
Turnover is
one of
very
the
great, too.
one of the sessions I attended today was about a department, so not an entire college, but a department that really has a well-defined system for reaching out to and integrating their adjuncts to be sure that they are addressing both what are the learning outcomes of the course, do you have a rubric for how you're measuring that you're being consistent, do we know that the whole department is relatively consistent? So, I mean, I want to throw the challenge out there. We've already got groups of faculty who are leading the way on how to integrate adjuncts better. And frankly, we as presidents are going to need faculty across the college to do more of that outreach.
It's going to change the nature of the job. You're not just teaching 3 or 4 courses or whatever it is. You're also having a responsibility over the instruction in that way. That's the only way I could see it happening.
As we are adapting to the Common Core and the Park exam, community colleges, what are public schools doing to address that they are fully implementing these changes as well as financially, as well as we talk about certifying and having professionals as adjunct faculty. What are they doing as far as having professionals in elementary schools from the bottom, working from the bottom up, rather than us adapting to the quality of students that we're receiving at community colleges? And maybe you can just, if there's some words
Well,
that they've mentioned.
I can't answer for them except what I hear officially in the meetings and things like that. I know that they will be using these results, and this is what's got some people worried. They will be using the results as an assessment of school districts also. So there's an expectation that the districts will be able to respond to these tests. And I know that that's the big question. How do you do it across such an uneven socioeconomic and parental involvement and facilities viability and broad bandwidth accessibility? And I mean, that's the nature of our society. How's that going to happen? I don't know. I've heard from the Department of Ed officials that they think they have the money and they've given them, but we'll see what happens. So are they I think in the best school districts it will happen easily. I think some of the instructional level for those districts will pull up some of the students who are in better districts but not performing as high. I think they'll perform higher. I think some of the students in less well-supported districts will still struggle.
It's important to separate in that question the difference between the Common Core and the testing component PARC. The Common Core has actually been developed for several years. So for at least 3 years, school districts have already been on a sort of a forced march to compare their curriculum, the State Department of Ed integrated Common Core with the statewide curriculum elements, and districts across the state, probably unevenly, have had a lot of professional development, preparing their teachers. And I believe, again, just from what I listened to at the countywide superintendent's meetings, that the evaluation for teachers in the schools has actually been changed to include components about this.
Yeah, I've heard teachers tell me they had more professional development in the last 4 years than they had in the previous 10, 15. So it is happening in some places.
The only concern I have, well, one concern is, since it's going to, this new PARC program is going to affect teachers and their evaluations and so forth, I just hope the school districts aren't just going to be teaching students how to take exams. And then when they come to us at the college level, they're not ready, to enter college. But it's showing by taking the exam that they are. But when they enter college, they're not. Look at what we have today. Students are taking these HESPA tests, and they're passing, they're graduating, but they're coming to college. And I know where I work, a lot of them can't even write a sentence.
Well, the tests that they're using here are not the same kind of test.
Right.
There is a multiple choice component. There's also a writing test component. And there's a component that uses the newer technology in ways that young people are supposedly being able to adapt to well, of highlighting and dragging and dropping. But there is more writing than ever before. And it's supposed to be also integrated with what they do, more writing through the curriculum and more writing on the tests, which should be better when they come to us, should be.
Thank you.